This program is supported by B-Bag Integra 3000 Plus, mixed pallet and grains. Iba ang laking Integra.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International, and I'm joined today by my co-anchor, no other than CJ Hero. Hello, CJ.
Hi, Alma. Good evening to you, and good evening to everyone watching us tonight. Welcome to the program. Here now are the headlines.
A gunman killed at least 10 people, including a police officer, at a grocery store in Colorado on Monday, according to police, in the latest shooting to hit a state that was the site of two of the most infamous mass murders in U.S. history.
Public health and World Health bodies are warning that substance abuse are now on the rise.
Russia and China rejected accusations they were seeking to use coronavirus vaccines to project their influence around the world.
When the Tokyo Olympics torch relay kicks off in Fukushima on Thursday, runners are hoping it will show the world the area is moving forward a decade after the 2011 disaster.
First to the U.S., a gunman killed at least 10 people, including a police officer, at a grocery store in Colorado, according to police, in the latest shooting to hit a state that was the site of two of the most infamous mass murders in U.S. history. Witnesses at the King Supermarket in Boulder County, 30 miles northwest of the state capital, Denver, said they initially heard multiple loud bangs outside the shop. Live-streamed video earlier showed a white middle-aged man shirtless with a bloodied leg detained by police and led from the supermarket. Let's take a look.
The public today, or this evening, that there is no ongoing public threat, that we do have a person of interest in custody. That person was injured during the incident and is being treated for the injuries. As has already been mentioned, we're very early in the investigation. As Dion shared, that we responded here, officers were here within minutes of the initial 911 calls and entered the building very quickly.
What's the motive for this?
Very early in the investigation, we don't have any details that I can share at this point. There will be additional information released as it's gathered and it's appropriate to release, but that will come from the Boulder Police Department.
How does he?
It was definitely panic. I think a lot of people just didn't know like exactly where he was or where he was going to be. For me and him, we are like pretty calm, just because we like know where we're going and we know Jesus. And so I think a lot of people though were really panicked and didn't know exactly if we should like just get out of the store and then stand there, or if like to move and like get somewhere else.
So all of a sudden when I was walking back to her, I heard just like a big bang. I was like, what the heck was that? Like, it kind of sounded like a gunshot. I wasn't sure if it was, but...
From inside or outside the store?
It was probably from outside because it was pretty muffled. But then all of a sudden, like, we started hearing more, like bang, 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 bang. And I, like, sprinted over to her and just like, told her, hey, like, we need to get out of here. And I pushed open the emergency door. And I think we were the first to be out because we triggered the alarm in the store. And
Western state has previously suffered two of the most infamous mass shootings in U.S. history, massacres that prompted nationwide soul-searching but didn't result in major changes to the country's lax gun ownership laws. In 1999, two boys shot and killed 12 classmates at a teacher at Columbine High School. Then in 2012, a heavily armed man stormed the movie theater in Aurora, murdering 12. The gunman is now serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The city of Boulder imposed a ban on assault-style weapons and large-capacity gun magazines in the wake of the Parkland, Florida shooting in 2018. But a judge last week blocked that ban The Denver Post reported in a decision hailed by the NRA, a pro-gun advocacy group. President Joe Biden said last month he wanted Congress to pass laws that would require background checks on all gun sales and ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines.
In other news, rivers remain high in a suburb in the Australian city of Sydney as rain falls, pushing up flood waters that have inundated homes and roads over the past days. Emergency services are seen in boats as locals seek to protect their homes. Watch this.
It's been crazy. I put a time lapse on yesterday, like from where you could see the paddock, all the grass, and it just rose up and up and up. Covered our fence, covered all of our bushes. It wasn't this bad last year in February, but it's crazy compared to last year. 3 years. We moved from England in 2017. So last year was the bushfires and the floods, and now this year's another flood. It's been crazy, especially compared to life in England. It's almost extreme. It's like the extremes of weather. It's torrential rain, or it's super hot, 40-degree days, and forests are on fire. It's been crazy. It
hasn't really moved, but we're told it still could move. So again, it's still just playing that waiting game, waiting to see if it is going to come up or not. We've survived a few high tides so far with it coming in and the opening of the dam. So hopefully this is where it stays. I've been lucky. People around us not so lucky. Houses in the next street have lost bottom floors and gone under, and neighbours have lost their front yards. So far, I'm lucky.
A relentless week-long downpour has soaked most of New South Wales, causing surging rivers to burst their banks, swallowing homes, roads, bridges, and farmland. Strained emergency services, which just 1 year ago were battling drought and unprecedented bushfires, used military aircraft and water sports equipment to access cut-off communities. So far, around 850 people have been winched or ferried to safety, but tens of thousands have been told to flee their homes, and wild weather has spread to more inland areas. In hard-hit Windsor, near Sydney, residents traverse the murky debris-strewn torrent on jet skis and other vessels normally seen off the city's golden beaches. Some coastal regions have received a meter or 3 feet of water in a week, the equivalent of 2/3 of normal annual rainfall.
Public health and World Health bodies are warning that substance abuse are on the rise. Many have already suffered from addiction, even before the COVID outbreak. Now, these are stressful times, and people are turning to a variety of coping strategies, and one of them being alcohol.
We've now decided that the sale, the dispensing, and the distribution of alcohol will be suspended with immediate effect. There is now clear evidence that the resumption of alcohol sales has resulted in substantial pressure being put on hospitals, including trauma and ICU units, due to motor vehicle accidents, violence, as well as related trauma that are alcohol-induced.
Americans living under prolonged threat of danger associated with this pandemic have reported emotional reactions that include anxiety, depression, grief, substance use, and thoughts of suicide. Disrupted feelings of safety are tragically exacerbated by death of a loved one, illness, intimate partner violence, child abuse, and poverty. For children with trauma histories, new loss and adversity can result in nightmares, outbursts, school challenges, and complicate trauma and grief reactions.
Sylvie, we also hear this question very often about alcohol and COVID-19. If you have COVID-19 and you consume a lot of alcohol, it'll sanitize you, it'll disinfect you and kill the virus. Science or myth?
No, in fact, drinking alcohol doesn't cure or doesn't prevent COVID-19 infection. The virus is not sensitive to the alcohol we drink. But maybe people are confused because they see that we use hydroalcoholic gel to wash our hands, but in reality the alcohol that is in the hydroalcoholic gel is much more concentrated, and this is certainly not something you can drink, otherwise you will have serious side effects. So it's only to wash your hands, not for drinking.
According to the World Health Organization, it's important to understand that alcohol poses risks to your health and safety and should therefore be avoided during periods of home isolation or quarantine. They said, quote, when working from home, adhere to your usual workplace rules and do not drink. Remember, they said that after a lunch break, you should still be in a fit state of work, and that is not possible if you are under the influence of alcohol. Avoid stockpiling alcohol at home, as this will potentially increase your alcohol consumption and the consumption of others in your household. Your time, money, and other resources are better invested in buying healthy and nutritious food that will maintain good health and enhance your immune system response. You might think that alcohol helps you to cope with stress, but they said it's not in fact a good coping mechanism, as it is known to increase the symptoms of panic and anxiety disorders, depression, and other mental disorders, and the risk of family and domestic violence. Instead of consuming alcohol to pass your time at home, try an indoor workout. Physical activity strengthens the immune system and overall from both a short-term and a long-term perspective is a highly beneficial way of spending a period of quarantine. Alcohol use can increase during self-isolation, and both isolation and drinking may also increase the risk of suicide. So reducing your alcohol consumption is very important. Alcohol is closely associated with violence, including intimate partner violence. Men perpetrate most of the violence against women, which is worsened by their alcohol consumption, while women experiencing violence are likely to increase their alcohol use as a coping mechanism. People with an alcohol use disorder are at greater risk of COVID-19, not only because of the impact of alcohol on their health, but also because they are more likely to experience homelessness or incarceration than other members of the population. It's therefore essential under the current conditions that people who need help because of their alcohol use can get all the support they need. And we'll have more for you as we follow this developing story.
COVID has taken over, says Beverly Veras, feeling abandoned by health authorities as her two sons battle heroin addiction. In rural Pennsylvania, Beverly and her husband feel the pandemic has taken away precious help to battle the country's opioid epidemic, whilst Savannah Johnson, a 26-year-old former drug addict, explains that she risked relapse at the start of 2020. Watch this.
This is Charles, and then Douglas.
We had received a phone call that Doug had been arrested. He had taken the police on a 16-mile police chase.
2 weeks later, you got a second DUI.
Yep. And then it just slowly...
Things were just... at that point,
slowly went downhill. If the phone's not ringing, then they're alive, they're not dead. And they're not in jail. You know, I mean, I know it sounds bad, but it's the truth.
COVID's just taken over. You know, like they're not focusing on anything else but COVID. You know, and I know in our area, from what we see, to be honest, I don't know if I could pick a friend of my kids if any of their friends have been affected by drugs. The drugs have just come into this area and has taken over, you know, and it's gotten worse since COVID.
The opioid crisis was the main issue facing us in public health prior to the pandemic, and a lot of the nation's state public health leadership was very, very focused on it and very active in trying to make changes and interventions that would help stem the tide. But since the pandemic has hit, it's been very, very difficult.
How are you guys?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Good. Had a good day today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We are here for both our boys, Charles and Douglas. As of right now, they are both addicted to heroin. Douglas started off with an opioid habit, and it progressed to meth, then to heroin. They're both in and out of the system. As of right now, we're not really sure where they're at.
What are some of the struggles that you guys have had during COVID?
The loneliness. The depression to start with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, we know that the mental health goes oftentimes hand in hand with a substance use disorder, and that can complicate things.
She's doing well with, and Chase is coming along good.
Yeah.
That's my daughter. Unfortunately, I was using even after I was getting rings under my eyes because I wasn't sleeping for days. My teeth started going bad. I just looked, my face started getting sunken. I started a new job and it got hold on pause, you know, because of the COVID thing. So then I had no job. I had to sit at home, you know, you isolate yourself, and both of those things are not, you know, conducive to recovery.
She had to tell us that she had overdosed. That was the first time. I don't think it was This is Chase, and this is Elena. And a good friend of mine did that.
It was good to be able to come here, and if I wouldn't have come here, I don't really know, you know, what I would have done. I don't know if I would have went back out to use, I don't know. But I'm just glad that being here, I had the support for me to actually want to stay clean.
Meanwhile, child health experts say kids and teens are already struggling to learn outside the classroom during the pandemic. But the lockdowns and quarantines are also making it hard for them to control their weight. Now, lost routines, economic insecurity, and grief are also making things more challenging for children who struggle with their weight, whether it's with obesity or anorexia, according to doctors at the Stanford Children's Health in California. When stay-at-home orders and online school became widespread, many young people were no longer participating in sports or even walking the halls at school. Dr. Neville Golden, Chief of Adolescent Medicine, who treats patients at the Stanford Children's Health's Comprehensive Eating Disorders Program, said that other children are struggling with eating disorders and losing dangerous amounts of weight. Teens' heightened anxiety, depression, and feelings of loss have contributed to the rise in eating disorders, Golden said, and some may also feel sad about events they have missed during the pandemic. Both experts encourage families to call their child's pediatrician with weight concerns. Many programs are now offering some elements of weight management through telemedicine.
In other news, Russia and China on Tuesday rejected accusations they were seeking to use coronavirus vaccines to project their influence around the world. Speaking to reporters after talks with Chinese counterpart Wang Yi, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov insisted that both countries were guided by principles of humanity rather than geopolitical interests. Watch this.
Чтобы в этих вопросах все руководствовались исключительно соображениями гуманности, интересами спасения жизней, а не геополитическими соображениями и некоммерческими подходами к, так сказать, преодолению конкуренции. Это абсолютно необходимо помнить всем, в том числе и нашим партнерам на Западе, которые пытаются выставить Россию и Китай в качестве неких авантюристов на ниве вакцинной дипломатии, так называемой. Это абсолютно не соответствует действительности.
大国要带头讲平等，做践行联合国宪章的表率，不能唯我独尊，动辄从什么实力地位出发来以势压人。大国要带头讲诚信，做尊重别国正当权利的表率。 不能以自己的标准肆意干涉别国内政，打着民主人权旗号 搞政权更迭。
China, where the coronavirus originated, has been supplying several countries with vaccines and sometimes for free. Russia has been proudly distributing its Sputnik V vaccine, named after the first satellites launched by the Soviet Union. Critics in the West accuse the two powers of using the vaccines to extend their global influence, while Moscow and Beijing say Western countries are buying up and hoarding vaccines, often to the detriment of poor countries.
Meanwhile, the head of the UN Health Agency said the growing gap between the number of vaccines being given in rich countries and those administered through COVAX is becoming more grotesque every day. Let's listen in.
The gap between the number of vaccines administered in rich countries and the number of vaccines administered through COVAX is growing every single day and becoming more grotesque every day. Countries that are now vaccinating younger, healthy people at low risk of disease are doing so at the cost of the lives of health workers, older people, and other at-risk groups in other countries. The world's poorest countries wonder whether rich countries really mean what they say when they talk about solidarity. The inequitable distribution of vaccines is not just a moral outrage. It's also economically and epidemiologically self-defeating. If countries wouldn't share vaccines for the right reasons, we appeal to them to do it out of self-interest. There are some countries that have set a great example. The Republic of Korea, despite being a high-income country that could easily afford to buy vaccines through bilateral deals, has waited its turn for vaccines through COVAX. WHO is continuing to work day and night to find solutions to increase the production and equitable distribution of vaccines.
Not least, we also have Dr. Teresa Kasaiwa, the director.
So far, AstraZeneca is the only company that has committed to not profiting from its COVID-19 vaccine during the pandemic. And so far, it's the only vaccine developer that has made a significant contribution to vaccine equity by licensing its technology to several other companies, including SK Bio in the Republic of Korea and the Serum Institute of India, which are producing more than 90% of the vaccines that have so far been distributed through COVAX. We need more vaccine producers to follow this example and license their technology to other companies.
Agencies that are procuring it.
And our big concern remains the concern that these vaccines aren't getting to the most vulnerable and needy populations in every country around the world. The issue right now is there's simply not enough vaccine to get to the healthcare workers of the low-income countries and to get to the to obviously the older populations in those countries. And right now, this is not a financial issue. Right now, this is a problem of access to the product itself. So it's not a differential issue around vaccines and vaccine prices. The issue right now is the control of the supply is held by a limited number of countries that have procured most of the doses and the early access to those doses. And what we're trying to do is find mechanisms, whether through dose sharing, through donations, through exchanging places in the queue for contracts so that we can move up the line further those doses that need to go to the COVAX facility so that they can get to populations everywhere.
Meanwhile, Chief Executive Carrie Lam today said she will personally look into the 21-day quarantine requirement for inbound travelers from places outside China and acknowledged the pressure people faced when placed under quarantine. Watch this.
The 21-day quarantine that Hong Kong has imposed on arrivals from outside China is, I would confess, is very stringent. But at the same time, the fact is we continue to have positive cases confirmed beyond the 14th day while in quarantine. I certainly am fully and acutely aware of the pressure that this has put on a lot of people, not only just business travelers, but a lot of people. To be isolated for 21 days is a huge load in terms of physical and psychological and other aspects. So I would say that I would personally look into this matter and see whether we could find mitigating factors to reduce or to bring back the 21-day to the normal 14 days, which are adopted in many other places. But at the same time, we could assure that there are safeguards in place to ensure that if people leave the quarantine center or hotel earlier than 21 days, there are certain safeguards or medical surveillance in place to ensure that they will not bring infection into the community.
The Center for Health Protection today said it is investigating 12 additional COVID-19 cases, of which 4 are locally transmitted, including one with an unknown source of infection. The unlinked case involves an 88-year-old retired man who developed fever on March 17. He attended United Christian Hospital's Accident and Emergency Department on March 22 and tested positive for the virus. The remaining 3 local cases are linked with other cases. 2 of the patients developed symptoms on March 21st, while the remaining 1 was asymptomatic.
To Latin America now, where Venezuela has suffered a deadly second wave of the coronavirus. As the head of one medical clinic says, the number of cases and their seriousness has increased compared to last year. Take a look.
Ha aumentado el volumen de los pacientes en esta nueva ola y hay casos más graves que el año pasado.
Para un monitoreo específico. Ahora, cuando el paciente ingresa y nos manifiesta un elemento, nosotros manejamos un plan quirúrgico controlado.
Tenemos una bombona inmensa allá abajo, bueno, donde viene el oxígeno normalmente, donde en el flujo normal de llenado del oxígeno era una vez por mes. En la actualidad se está haciendo una vez cada 5 días. Eso hace que las compañías, y eso es aquí en todas las clínicas grandes que estamos, o sea, se ha cuatriplicado el uso del oxígeno.
Asistente de seguridad que le colabora en el retiro del...
The news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
This portion is brought to you by Canriv Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel, hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation, and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
Our March monthly winner ay walang iba, kundi si...
You captured my heart.
Wow, iba ka.
Pag kumakanta siya, nakangiti lagi. Para bang ikaw
Action!
Welcome back to the news. Papua New Guinea received its first batch of coronavirus vaccines Tuesday as the country raced to quell a COVID-19 surge, overwhelming its fragile health system. Watch this. An initial shipment of 8,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine was flown in from neighboring Australia, earmarked to protect badly hit frontline hospital staff. Prime Minister James Marape greeted the Grey Air Force C-17 bearing the vaccine, 3 mobile storage facilities, and a small team of Australian public health specialists at Jackson's International Airport in Port Moresby. Papua New Guinea survived a year without widespread community transmission, but the impoverished Melanesian nation is now detecting hundreds of cases each day. Some hospitals have been forced to turn away new patients due to a lack of medical staff who are testing positive in large numbers.
In other news, Israelis were voting Tuesday in their 4th election in less than 2 years, with the nation deeply split on whether veteran Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu should remain in power. Netanyahu, 71, is Israel's longest-serving premier and its most popular politician, but his inability to unite a stable governing majority behind him has mired the country in unprecedented political gridlock. Take a look.
The whole way the campaign is going it's like kids playing in the daycare. Seriously, it's not a serious feeling. It doesn't give a feeling that our leaders are really thinking of how to show themselves as leaders. They're wasting a lot of energy trashing each other. But I guess that's how it is in politics in Israel or in other places.
And so the question is whether there can be some sort of determining result that gives either side, the pro-Netanyahu parties or the parties that are trying to form a coalition without Netanyahu, a clear enough advantage. At present, it doesn't look like either side has sufficient votes to reach a decisive answer. Parties espousing a right-wing ideology in Israel are currently polling quite consistently at between 76 and 78 seats out of 120. That means that whoever becomes prime minister, the country is likely to espouse a right-wing direction on the key policy issues. But who is prime minister, whether it's Netanyahu or somebody else, could take the country either further to the right or possibly a more restrained policy. I don't imagine any reversals. But it seems at this point like Netanyahu is still the most likely to become prime minister after the elections. That doesn't mean that he is extremely likely, because Netanyahu's party is certainly winning top place in the elections in all polls. It's been very stable, but the parties that support him for coalition building have not yet managed to reach a majority of the Knesset seats, which they would need to form a government in any of the polls or in any of the poll averages.
Election workers in full COVID protective gear staff polling stations for voters currently in quarantine, but thanks to a world-leading vaccination effort, most citizens wore only face masks. Netanyahu, 71, is Israel's longest-serving premier and its most popular politician, but his inability to unite a stable governing majority behind him has mired the country in unprecedented political gridlock. He hopes to be rewarded by voters for the campaign that has inoculated half of Israel's roughly 9 million people against the coronavirus, a pace envied by much of the world, and for striking historic diplomatic normalization deals with several Arab states. But while his right-wing Likud party appears set to win the most seats, Netanyahu will need coalition partners to secure a majority in the 120-seat Knesset. That means Israel is looking at 3 possible outcomes. Another coalition under Netanyahu, who has been in power for 12 straight years, an ideologically divided government united only by its opposition to him, or a looming 5th election.
In other news, Myanmar's military on Tuesday said it was sad about people killed in its brutal crackdown on anti-coup protests, but vowed to press ahead with stamping out what it called anarchy. In a news conference in the capital, Naypyidaw, junta spokesman Brigadier General Zhao Min-ten put the death toll at 164. He said, and I quote, "I am sad because these violent terrorist people who died are our nationals." End quote. The streets of towns and cities across the country have seen chaotic scenes for weeks as security forces clash with protesters demanding the restoration of democracy and the release of Suu Kyi. The authorities have used tear gas, rubber bullets, and live rounds to disperse protests, prompting a senior U.S. rights expert to warn they may be committing crimes against humanity. Zhao Min-ten defended the response, saying the security forces were dealing with insurgents holding weapons, and 5 police and 4 soldiers had been killed. The country's internet connection has also been throttled and mobile data services suspended. Zhao Min-ten said there were currently no plans to restore mobile data networks.
Meanwhile, 15 people have so far been confirmed dead, and 400 are still missing in a huge blaze at the Rohingya refugee camp in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, according to the United Nations. The cause of the fire is still unknown. It broke out Monday at the world's biggest refugee camp, where nearly 1 million people from the persecuted Rohingya Muslim minority are sheltering, having fled a brutal military-led offensive in neighboring Myanmar. The UN's International Organization for Migration said it has pledged $1 million to relief efforts, but a further $20 million would be required to react to the most urgent needs. IOM spokeswoman Angela Wells said the fire had caused catastrophic damage, and the health clinic run by the IOM, the camp's largest, was completely destroyed. IOM teams worked through the night to help those who fled the scene.
Here in the Philippines now, where President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday reiterated that he approved loans made by the Philippines to purchase COVID-19 vaccines are still with multilateral lenders. This after Senators Panfilo Ping Lacson and Rizon Tiveros questioned where the funds for the COVID-19 vaccines are. Duterte defended the government's financing scheme for vaccines, noting that they had to borrow funds from multilateral lenders like World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to be able to pay for vaccines. Watch this.
Ang buong akala kasi nila, yung pera na bilyon na ibinigay nila sa Kongreso, nandiyan na sa kamay natin, that it's called cash. At nasaan na yung pera. Sinasabi na natin, time and again, that the money is with the lending bank. Still. So we have not used any single centavo of it, because as a matter of fact, about the vaccines that we are going to buy, pero donated ito lahat sa ngayon.
Sa ngayon, donated pa?
What is in our hands are the donated vaccines.
Di donated, I think 500,000 lang eh. 500,000 doses lang eh.
Yeah, and the 400, you're referring to Sinovac,
yes.
China.
Yes.
Well, China gave us 500,000 free. Tapos magdagdag sila ng 400,000 more. So that would make it 1 million. Yan, walang bayad yan. So libre yan. Ngayon, itong dadating, day after tomorrow, is it? Dadating na yung binabayaran natin, ay yung babayaran pala natin. Doon pa dapat sila magtanong kung nasaan na yung pera. And I am not really, ang pagkaakala ko sa commercial law ko, pag maghiram ka ng pera sa bangko, magbayad ka, it is not done by money. Kailangan po 5 truck dyan bago kakutin yung pera na yan. Yan po ay papilang. And, you know, if you are afraid of corruption, let your mind go easy because these things are not susceptible to anything. The money is in the hands of the bank and they collect yung nagpabili sa atin ng bakuna from the bank. Hindi sa atin na pumunta yan kay Sunny Dominguez na bubuksan niya yung drawer o sabi niya ito na yung pangbayad. Hindi ho.
So, the total financing we have for the vaccines, logistics, and other supplies, including waste disposal, is 82.5 billion pesos.
So, sana yung pera na billion dyan, nasa kamay ba natin yan ngayon?
Hindi po, nasa bangko pa. Kasi we did not withdraw yet. Kasi we will only withdraw when we pay.
Yes.
Because why should we hold the money? Kasi babayad tayo ng interest eh. So, mientras tanto na hindi pa na-deliver, hindi pa due ang payment, we'll keep it in the bank first.
Eagle News will be back with more updates. Please don't go away.
BMEG Integra 3000 Plus mixed pellets and grains. Gawa sa tamang timpla ng expertly formulated pellets at grains para sa magandang pangangatawan at tamang timbang ng inyong mga manok. BMEG Integra 3000 Plus. Iba ang laking Integra.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Back to the pandemic situation around the world. Let's go to France, where the country said it should be vaccinating morning, noon, and evening. That is according to President Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday, as he battles criticism that the COVID-19 immunization drive has been too slow. Take a look.
Maintenant, le cœur de la bataille sur les prochaines semaines et les prochains mois, ce sera la vaccination. Matin, midi et soir, je peux vous dire, je serai mobilisé, le gouvernement sera mobilisé et l'ensemble, je le sais, des professionnels soignants partout en France sera mobilisé dans cette bataille.
France is tackling a third wave of infections, but is lagging behind many Western countries in terms of the number of people vaccinated. It has rolled out some 8.8 million doses compared with over 30 million in Britain and nearly 11 million in Germany. While the inoculation drive has speeded up in recent weeks, it has failed to keep step with the spike in new cases, which prompted the government to place a third of the population under partial lockdown last weekend. On Monday, Health Minister Olivier Véran announced that the army would set up 35 mass vaccination centers. Until now, France has been relying on community halls, hospitals, doctors' surgeries, and pharmacies, while the U.S., Britain, and several other countries have requisitioned stadiums. France, which has some of the world's most protective labor laws, has also taken a relatively leisurely approach to administering vaccines over the weekend.
Meanwhile, Germany will enter a strict shutdown for 5 days over Easter amid surging virus rates. Chancellor Angela Merkel and regional leaders agreed Tuesday as criticism mounts over the government's handling of the pandemic, as well as extending existing measures, including keeping cultural, leisure, and sporting facilities shut through to April 18, Merkel and Germany's 16 state premiers ordered a tougher shutdown between April 1 and 5. Almost all shops will be closed during the 5 days, and religious services will be moved online over Easter, only allowed to open on Saturday, April 3. Chancellor Angela Merkel said the situation is serious. Case numbers are rising exponentially, and intensive care beds are filling up again. She said the British variant has become the dominant strain circulating in Germany, adding, "We are in a new pandemic." The chancellor added that Germany was in a race to vaccinate as the country struggles to accelerate its inoculation campaign. Merkel said she would support her former defense minister and current EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's threat to block AstraZeneca vaccines produced in the bloc from being exported. European officials are furious that AstraZeneca has been able to deliver its UK contract in full while falling short on its supplies to the EU.
Now, to mark the anniversary of Britain's first national coronavirus lockdown, Prince Charles calls for the nation to take a moment together to remember those who have been lost and to resolve to work for a future inspired by our highest values. Let's listen in.
Whatever our faith or philosophy may be, let us take a moment together to remember those who have been lost, to give thanks for their lives, and to acknowledge the inexpressible pain of parting. In their memory, let us resolve to work for a future inspired by our highest values that have been displayed so clearly by the people of this country through this most challenging of times.
The National Day of Reflection will see the silence observed in Parliament and elsewhere at noon local time. Prime Minister Boris Johnson ordered a lockdown on March 23 last year, shutting schools, non-essential shops and services, and banning gatherings of more than 2 people. Initially, the lockdown was meant to last 3 weeks. A year on, Britain is in its 3rd phase of restrictions, but is gradually loosening them thanks to a mass vaccination campaign. However, Prime Minister Johnson warned that a 3rd wave was now sweeping across Europe and will inevitably wash up on our shores, even as he called for reflection on the losses of the past year.
When the Tokyo Olympics torch relay kicks off in Fukushima on Thursday, runners are hoping it will show the world the area is moving forward a decade after the 2011 disaster. The pandemic might have overshadowed a games once billed as the Recovery Olympics after the earthquake and tsunami catastrophe, but Fukushima torchbearers say the relay can show their home in a new light. Watch this.
J ビレッジの再建に寄付。ありがとうございます。いろいろ V で
終わり。
はい。
以上 J ビレッジでしたもう何もなく。
ない。
そのままなんですね。
はい。福島って遠くからしたら時が止まったままなのかもしれないんですけれども、でも沿道の 様子だったりとか、すごく熱いパッションを持って走るランナーの皆さんの姿を見て、皆さんのその復興の時計の針を進めてもらいたいなって思います。
言い出した頃は国道なんて除染もできてないところがたくさんあって、最初の 1,2 年って大人たちは全く関心寄せてなかったんです。この浜通りの人たち、除染もしてないところ、聖火なんて走れないっていう大人げた意見が多くて、でも子供たち諦めないで何度も願い続けて、いろんな人に会いに行ってるから、やっぱりそういう苦労を私知ってるので、願いも知ってるので、200メートルだけど私にとって長い200メートルになるんではないかなと思ってます。
Well, it truly is a very important event for everyone there in Japan, especially in Fukushima, and the world will be watching that very happily.
True. It's like they're taking on a second meaning, like a recovery Olympics, hoping for a recovery for everyone too, for everyone around the world.
Well, we're just happy it's finally pushing through.
Yes.
That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I am CJ Hero, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Yes, we'll see you back tomorrow. And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live
in
interesting times.